Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to be with you today because we are unpacking a truly fascinating piece of literature. We're looking at Ricardo Gomez's contemporary historical fiction novel, The Tides of Freedom, and more specifically, we're diving into its explicitly analytical epilogue. See, the author uses this fictional story of a Caribbean island nation to examine what he sees as very real, very present vulnerabilities in United States democracy today. It is a structured, systematic breakdown of how democratic institutions can erode. So we're going to go right through the source material to see exactly how Gomez builds this really compelling argument.
To set the intellectual tone for us today, we actually have to start with this powerful quote from the philosopher Hannah Arendt, which the author prominently features right in his prologue. The source points out that a functioning democracy fundamentally requires a shared factual reality. I mean, even if we fiercely disagree on policies or values, we absolutely need a common ground of truth, because without it, the whole foundation for democratic deliberation simply crumbles. This idea of a shared reality under threat is literally the heartbeat of the novel.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our thematic roadmap for today. We'll start by looking at fiction as a political mirror, then explore capturing democratic institutions, followed by the machinery of dehumanization, silencing experts in dissent, and finally, the path to resistance.
Section 1. Fiction as a political mirror. Narrative empathy. Now you might be wondering, why exactly does the author use a completely fictional Caribbean island, Puerto Liberta, to analyze the highly charged, real-world political dynamics of the modern United States? Well, the answer lies in this concept from the source's epilogue, narrative empathy from a distance. According to the author, when we try to discuss the erosion of our own democracy directly, we often get tangled up in our own partisan identities. We get defensive, right? Fiction, however, provides this much-needed psychological distance. It allows us to step back and clearly analyze the vulnerabilities in our own systems by watching them unfold in a parallel imagined world. The source explicitly sets up this thematic mirror for the reader. Throughout our explainer today, we're going to be looking at how Gomez uses the fictional ascent of President Miguel Vega in Puerto Libertad to impartially illustrate his specific concerns regarding the real-world U.S. administration in 2025. And it's important to note here that we are simply reporting on the author's analysis of these parallels, just unpacking how the novel links fictional scenarios to the real-world political events that he cites in the epilogue.
Section 2. Capturing democratic institutions, gradual erosion.
Now, what's really interesting here is that the source emphasizes a chilling historical pattern. Democracies rarely fall overnight to obvious dramatic military coups. Instead, they erode gradually through what the author's academic epilogue terms executive aggrandizement. This is the steady, methodical concentration of power in the executive branch. And it happens through maneuvers that are technically legal, things like exploiting emergency powers or engaging in regulatory capture, where agencies are basically hollowed out and restaffed with those loyal to the executive rather than to the Constitution. The author explicitly parallels these dynamics. In the fiction, President Vega demands loyalty over expertise, immediately replacing career government officials with family members and loyalists under the guise of national security. According to the source's epilogue, this directly mirrors real-world U.S. administrative actions from early 2025. The author points to proposed 50% cuts to agencies like the EPA and the abrupt laying off of 1,300 CDC officers as examples of dismantling expertise-based institutions. And this brilliantly illustrates the author's core argument. Constitutional structures on paper cannot protect a democracy without actual institutional forbearance from the real people running them. In the fictional arena of judicial independence, Vega threatens the Chief Justice and sets up an executive review board to oversee the courts. The author ties this straight to real-world 2025 rhetoric, where the executive branch attacked judicial activists who blocked their agenda. And regarding the separation of powers, Vega simply bypasses his parliament with emergency orders, which the author argues reflects real-world attempts to expand executive authority and bypass traditional constraints.
Section 3. The machinery of dehumanization, administrative violence.
This brings us to a highly intense theme in the source. The author introduces the concept of administrative violence and the philosophical idea of homo sacer, basically individuals who are physically present but exist completely outside legal protection. The author is making the point that totalitarian control rarely begins with physical force in the streets. No, it begins quietly. It starts in offices, by administratively turning specific, targeted groups into non-persons on paper, stripping their rights while maintaining a very careful veneer of legal process. The book dramatizes this through the National Registry of True Citizens.
It's a law that categorizes political opponents, undocumented immigrants, and LGBTQ individuals as administrative non-persons, subjecting them to property seizure and detention. The author draws a highly charged comparison here to real-world 2025 mass deportation operations, pointing to U.S. executive orders that attempted to end birthright citizenship, along with efforts to expand detention facilities like Guantanamo Bay for migrants.
So the crucial point is that this is a repeatable historical playbook. It's like a step-by-step instruction manual. In the novel, the character Professor Sofia Dominguez outlines these exact steps on a chalkboard for her students. First, you attack information sources and independent journalism. Second, you capture the institutions, the courts, the electoral bodies. And third, you criminalize the opposition using those exact captured legal mechanisms. Section 4. Silencing experts and dissent. Targeting expertise. The source outlines how both the fictional regime of Puerto Libertad and its real-world counterpart systematically target expertise across multiple sectors. In academia, the novel features patriotic education monitors sitting right there in university classrooms. The source links this to recent U.S. legislation restricting how racial history and gender are taught. Over in the environmental sector, Vega erases regulations to help his family's private developments, which the author mirrors against the U.S. withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord. And in finance, the fictional regime freezes the bank accounts of opposition groups under the guise of security. The author compares this directly to the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, abruptly halting agency contracts and payments in reality. Alongside targeting experts, there is linguistic control. The author notes that dictating the specific language government agencies are allowed to use is a vital, totally intentional tool for reshaping political reality. By forcing the use of terms like illegal alien over undocumented immigrant, or defining gender in strictly binary terms, the regime begins to frame how the public is even capable of discussing these issues. Let's see how this builds, because what the novel illustrates, and what the author argues is true of real-world democratic erosion, is the shocking speed of it all. By day 1, Vega uses executive orders to restrict borders and create chaos. By week 2, the purges of civil servants and academics are well underway. By month 3, the National Registry is law. The author emphasizes that this rapid pace is designed to be deeply disorienting, making resistance feel completely overwhelming to the average citizen.
Section 5. The path to resistance. Breaking points.
But there is resistance, shifting from the mechanisms of erosion to the breaking points that actually spark pushback. The climax of the novel centers on this absolutely crucial concept: dual loyalty conflicts. This happens when individuals within an institution, particularly the military, are forced to make a choice. Do they follow the direct orders of their executive superior, or do they honor their broader oath to the nation's constitution?
In the book, this conflict peaks when Admiral Moreno outright refuses President Vega's orders to establish an illegal blockade and fire on civilians, choosing the Constitution over the dictator. The epilogue neutrally relays that this mirrors real-world stress points, citing the 2025 U.S. administration's unprecedented purging of top military leadership, which included the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and judge advocate generals. The source observes that the military inevitably becomes a critical fault line when executive power overreaches.
Ultimately, the author's primary takeaway is encapsulated in this quote: "Democracy requires defense before it visibly needs defending." Gomez argues that a constitution is, at the end of the day, just a piece of paper. It cannot enforce itself. It requires the active, daily commitment of the citizenry and institutional leaders who are willing to uphold it even when it is politically really difficult. Which leaves us with a provocative question to consider today. How do you participate in the daily practice of democratic citizenship? Are you simply relying on institutions to protect themselves, or are you actively engaged in the process? This source material gives us an incredibly structured, if chilling, lens through which to view our modern political landscape. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this sparked your curiosity, and I highly encourage you to look deeper into these concepts.